Good evening everyone. In this video, we are going to be discussing what are side effects in React and how to use the use effect hook in React.
So I have just a simple box component with some basic stylings. Okay, so now what are side effects in React? So side effects are something that are not controlled by the React framework. It is something that is outside the scope of your component and it cannot be controlled by the React framework. Examples are access to API calls using fetch, etc., or access to browser APIs like local storage and session storage are great examples of side effect. Now, usually you would use a use effect hook to perform a side effect in React, but let us perform a side effect without using that hook to see why we need that hook. What I will do, I will just call an API, which is just a random quotes API. Okay, so what I will do, I will just create a state variable for holding my data equal to set data. Now, and what next I will do, I will just call the API. Okay, so using fetch API dot send response to response.json. And what I will do with the JSON object that I have got, I will just set my data to my JSON. Okay, so I will just set data to my JSON, and what I will do, I will just console.log my JSON. Okay. So now what have I done? I have just created a state variable and I've called an API which is a random quotes API, and with the data I'm converting it to JSON, and the JSON which we have got, I'm setting my JSON to my data, and then I'm console.logging my JSON. Now if I open my console, how many times do you think will the JSON will be printed in the console? I will just refresh it, and if I just open my console right here, you could see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it keeps on rendering, it is not stopping. So I will just comment it out. Now, okay. In the first case, why did that happen? So it happened because of, I will tell the reason. See, we are calling this fetch API, and we are just setting our set data to JSON. So whenever this line is called, it just re-renders the whole UI. Since data is a state variable, so when set data is called, it re-renders the whole UI. And when this UI whole re-renders, then the first time the console log will happen, and the next time it will again reach the fetch statement. And again this console.log will happen because again set data will be set to JSON. And again it will render, and again it will be set to JSON, and again it will log to the console. So it will be an infinite re-render loop and it will not stop ever. So to avoid this and to perform other side effects, we use the use effect hook. It is imported just like the use state hook. And what we have to do, we have to just use a use effect like this. And the first argument it takes is a callback function. And the second argument it takes is a dependencies array, which I will tell you later. So the first argument it takes is a callback array. So I will just, for the sake of understanding, I will just console.log something like hello, anything like that. Okay, so if I now on my console, you could see that hello got gets logged once. So what really happens is whenever the component renders, whenever the rendering of this component is complete, so whenever all the items are placed onto the screen and every other task is over, so when the rendering is completely over, then this use effect is called. So the component has mounted on the screen, when the component has been displayed on the screen, then this use effect will run. So when it has mounted, the callback function inside the use effect will be called, and so our hello is logged to the console. So now let us just move our fetch function to this to under this, and if I just again open my console, how many times do you think now the JSON will be printed? You could see that again it is an infinite loop, and you would now ask me it is why did I teach you this thing if it will render the again an infinite loop? So it is because we have not used the second argument, which is a dependencies array. Now what is the dependencies array? So a dependencies array contains a list of variables or items whose value when changes, then this use effect has to be done. Suppose if I make a variable known as count, let just wait, let count set count equals to use state 0. And what if I do, I will just, and every time when this use effect runs, I want my count to be increased by 1. So pref count equals pref count plus 1. So if I add my count to my dependencies array, and now if I run it, my console, and if I run it again, you can see that again is an infinite loop, because every time this use effect is run, we are updating the count state, and since this count depends, and since this use effect depends on this count, therefore every time the value of this count changes, the callback function inside the use effect is run. So since in this case every time when the use effect runs, this is changes, so it is an infinite loop again. Just comment it out. So I hope that you have understand what is a dependency array. And now for better understanding, if I just create a button, 1 second, we just create a button like this, and what I want, click me, something like that, and I want that like the simple button, and if I want that every time this button is clicked, I want the count to be increased by 1. So if I now click my button, so you could see that this effect inside a use effect has rerun, because this use effect depends on this count. So every time this count value increases or decreases or it changes, then this callback function will be run. You can add any number of values inside this array, and the use effect will depend on each of the values. So now I think that you understood what is a dependencies array. And if the dependencies array is empty, then this means that this use effect has to be run only once when the component first renders and it's mounted on the screen, and not the next time. So if I just keep it empty, then it will run only once and not any more time. So now the next thing to learn is the cleanup function. Now before learning about the cleanup function, I have made some tweaks in the code. So I have just conditionally rendered this box component. If this display value is true, then it will display the box component, and if it is false, then it will not display this box component, and this button just reverses the value of this display. Okay. Now, what is the cleanup function? So what I will do, I've just imported this use effect, and what I have done, I will just set an interval of 2 seconds, and I will display console.log after every 2 seconds. So now, if I just refresh it and open my console right here, you can see that every 2 seconds this hello is printed. Now, what would happen if I just remove this box from it? If I just remove the box from here, you could see that still the hello is locked to the console. I would want that if the box is removed from the screen, I do not want this use effect inside this box component. I do not want this interval to print hello every 2 seconds. So in order to avoid this, we use the cleanup function of the use effect hook. So the cleanup function is nothing but just a function which the use effect returns. Then the function. So first I will demonstrate the use of it. So what if I save my interval ID here, and what if I type clear interval with the interval ID right here? What do you think will be the output here? If I just open my console and just refresh my page, the first time you could see that hello is printed, but if I remove this component from here, you could see that the hello is no longer being printed on the screen. So what what the cleaner function does is, first of all, when this component unmounts from the screen, then after it has been removed from the screen, then this cleaner function runs every time. So it has many it runs many times. First of all, when our component loads on the screen, our this code runs, and after every render, First of all, this cleanup function runs with the old state and the old props, and after this cleanup function has run, then this function right here runs. So I hope that you understood what is a cleanup function. So to repeat it again, first of all, when a component loads, then this function right here is run, and after every re-render of the component, when some dependencies have changed, then this cleanup function first runs with the old values of the props. So, and after this old values of the props and states, then after when it has run, then this function right here runs with the new values of the props and the states. So I hope that you have learned what is the cleanup function. Okay, so with this we have come to the end of this video, and I hope that you have learned what is use effect hook, what are side effects, and what is a cleanup function, and what are the dependencies arrayed inside the use effect hook. Thank you for watching this video, and please subscribe our channel.